Salmond.
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I start by congratulating the former Chancellor on his speech, which was a good deal shorter and a great deal less lucrative than the ones he's used to giving these days. As has been pointed out to the Tory benches, he's anything but cheap these days. But can I say to the former Chancellor, they may have argued the case with passion during the campaign, but it was his tendency to take perfectly reasonable Treasury forecasts as to the long-term damage that would be done by withdrawal from the single market in terms of GDP and wealth of this country, and turn them into apocalyptic emergency budget, day of judgment scaremongering that was one of the reasons that the Remain side lost the campaign. Campaigns have to be built on more than fear. I want to talk about the politics, the economics, the procedure, and about Scotland. My honourable friend from the Hill and Year asked me yesterday if I could remember in the last 30 years in this place of a time when the House was gripped by collective madness. And that time obviously was Iraq, when this House was mesmerised by a strong Prime Minister into the blood and disaster of the Iraqi war. But it's certainly not mesmerising rhetoric that's responsible for mad MP disease in this case. The honourable member, right honourable member for Rushcliffe yesterday, compared it to Alice in Wonderland. But Alice only took herself into the hole. This Prime Minister is taking virtually all the Tory party, half the Labour Party and the entire country into the hole. It is politically crazy what is being done. In 1962, Dean Acheson said that Britain had lost her empire and was yet to find a role. Although listening to some of the speeches from the Tory backbenches yesterday, I wasn't so sure if they were reconciled to the empire bit. And the solution was found by successive governments and successive prime ministers by pursuing a role in Europe as a leading country and balancing that with a special relationship with the United States of America. Now, a German Chancellor once said the relationship was special because only one side knew about it. And that's certainly true. But nonetheless, it was a rational policy. Some Prime Ministers took it far too far into the desert of Iraq, but nonetheless, it was a rational, logical policy. But you can't pursue that policy of influence in Europe and all the good things that come from it, as the Right Honourable Member for Doncaster reminded us, cut that off and then pursue the special relationship with the United States of America. That leaves you caught in the headlights, like the Prime Minister was earlier this week, when asked to condemn the obvious thing that any human being would have condemned. She refuses to do it 3 times in case she offends her new bestie in the White House. And incidentally, the answer is, if she'd said it, she would have offended her new best friend in the White House. You go headlong into the arms of a United States President who is at best unpredictable. It's going to get worse and more embarrassing because of the imbalance in the relationship. And then there's the economic damage. Yes, I will.
I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. Earlier on, my honourable friend mentioned the issue about climatic change in relation to the American president. Well, he said he's going to tear those agreements up. Where will Britain stand then? What support will it get?
An excellent example of the embarrassments to come. The economic damage. There's nothing wrong with the Treasury medium-term forecasts about coming out of the single marketplace. Even if there's a bespoke deal, it's going to be a 6% loss in GDP. Yes, Emma.
Thanks to my right honourable friend. Can he help confirm my understanding that it was actually the Tories who wanted to safeguard British interests in the single market? Am I correct in recalling that in their manifesto?
The Tory 2015 manifesto is not my bedtime reading. But as I remember it, it was page 72 and it said, "We say yes to the single market." And they were right to say yes. It was funny yesterday that all the Conservative speakers remembered the commitment to a referendum, and not one of them remembered their commitment to the single marketplace. And of course it wasn't the case that a withdrawal from the European community means a withdrawal from the single marketplace. I had the pleasure during the campaign of debating with Daniel Hannan, MEP, who said absolutely nobody is talking about threatening our place in the single market. Of course, it's possible to honour the result of the referendum and stay within the single marketplace. And even if you think that there will be an exit from the single marketplace, it is madness in diplomatic negotiating terms to abandon that position now. You should keep the place in the single marketplace and allow the other European countries to negotiate you out of it, not give it away before the first word is spoken in the negotiations. And next, Mr Speaker, we come to the procedures of this House. This is the list of amendments stretching to hundreds and more, 103 pages now. And we're told this is to be debated in 3 days. The Scotland Bill, which was not the greatest constitutional change in history 18 months ago, got 6 days of debate. And I'd say to the Labour members, like the Honourable Member for Doncaster North, who listed all the things that are wrong with the government's approach, if you believe that now, you should vote against the government. Or if you can't do that, then at least vote against a programme motion which will make it impossible to debate the sensible changes that the right honourable gentleman outlined. So procedurally, of course, this is deficient, and as been pointed out well yesterday, it's not just deficient in terms of the time, it's also deficient in terms of the question which will eventually be put before this House, the final vote on the deal that comes back from a Prime Minister who said no deal is better than a bad deal, and therefore the choice the House will get is a bad deal or no deal. And therefore it is crucial that when the House debates that and comes to a decision, there is a meaningful vote, a vote that can make a difference, as opposed to Hobson's choice made with a metaphorical gun at this House's head. One last time.
I'm very grateful to the right honourable member for giving way. But on that point, if we are in a situation where the only deal on the table is a bad deal, does he agree with me that the responsibility for that being an eventuality will lie with the Prime Minister? It's not as if she can deny responsibility for that being a problem.
Yes, I would. But then, of course, if we're all in the suit and finding out it was the Prime Minister's responsibility will avail this country very little. Far better to try and make sure by our votes that we get a realistic choice that can actually make a difference. So finally, Mr Speaker, I come to the situation in Scotland. Scotland has a 1,000-year history as a European nation. There's a plaque to Sir William Wallace in Great Westminster Hall in his unjust trial, for which he presumably will get a pardon at some point soon. After his greatest victory in the Battle of Stirling Bridge, which was akin to Leicester winning the Premier League last season in terms of an upset and surprise, his first act was not to hold a ceilidh, but was to write to the Hanseatic League to secure Scotland's trading concessions across Europe at that time, in Lubeck and elsewhere. The importance of Scotland's European connections stretches back a millennium, and we are not going to allow this non-vision act of madness from this House take Scotland out of these connections. The Scottish Government have put forward the proposition Scotland's place in Europe, which offers the Prime Minister a way that Scotland should stay within the single marketplace, regardless of what she wants to do to this country. And the Prime Minister said today a frictionless border in Ireland was quite possible under these circumstances, without realising that, of course, if it's possible in Ireland, it's possible in Scotland as well. And I see the honourable member nodding, because in the early hours of this morning, I think I saw him say much the same thing in a debate, or perhaps it was one of his honourable friends in Hard Talk. A sad case if I'm watching Hard Talk at 1 o'clock in the morning, but nonetheless, it was an important admission. It was actually the honourable member for Esher and Walton. So it's important to understand that these examples are taking place in Europe at the present moment. The Prime Minister has it within her power and capacity to agree to accept the proposals, the compromise proposals of the Scottish Government, and allow Scotland as a nation to retain that trading place within the European context. But if that's not to happen, and if this House says we're going to go ahead with hard Tory Brexit, or full English Brexit, as we're calling it in Scotland now, we're going to sweep aside the concerns that are across this House in terms of economic and political damage. We're not going to accept the proposals from Scotland to follow the votes of people in the nation of Scotland and retain our European connection. We're not interested in Scottish jobs and investment and preserving that. If that is the criteria and attitude of government, if that is what this Prime Minister wants to do with Scotland, if she is determined to throw down that gauntlet, then she can be absolutely sure that Nicola Sturgeon, as First Minister, will pick it up. Yeah.